All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the various platforms, tuning in from either LinkedIn, YouTube. Welcome to our webinar on Blended Learning Fundamentals. My name is Yuva Rupchan Singh, and I have the pleasure of being your host as well as the moderator for the evening. March 15 was indeed a pivotal turning point in our country's education system. COVID-19 came, and with it, a new direction in how education was to be delivered. The definition of what a classroom was changed overnight, and we as educators now found ourselves scrambling to find new ways to navigate this unknown environment. With us this evening, we have our board of directors, which comprises Mr. Karan Ramganesh and Mr. Roger Sinhile, who are also our featured presenters. In addition, we have with us our fellow board members, Mr. Shiva Ram Singh and Mr. Kishan Rupan. It would be remiss of me not to mention our newest member of the team, Mr. Donald Noel, who will be lending some technical support to us this evening. Before we get started on our presentation, permit me a few minutes to tell you very briefly about our company. IDFECT is an e-learning and human resource development firm, which aims to consistently effect positive change by helping organizations, learning institutions, and individuals unleash their potential. For our presenters this evening, we have our dynamic duo comprising of Karen and Roger. Fellas, you all could decide who is Batman and Robin, right? Karen is a knowledge management and digital transformation professional who has a lifelong passion for influencing creative and empowering talent. He has been involved in the conceptualization, design, and implementation of e-learning, as well as human resource systems for organizations and other notable learning institutions. Roger is a forward-thinking and goal-focused professional with an extensive background in providing IT strategic leadership and including instructional design. He has over 20 years of experience creating and delivering in-person as well as online learning content in IT strategy, governance, and security. In addition to being a director at IDFECT, Roger is also a course developer and instructor at Learning Tree International, which is a leading provider of IT and management training to business and government organizations worldwide. I would like to now hand over to our presenters that will guide us through this evening's presentation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you all doing?
Hi, everything's going cool. So let's get our presentation up there.
Yeah, so let's just wait while the guys load up the slides and we could kick off.
Yep. Just give me 1 second here to upload.
So while we are with that, guys, for the guys who following on the stream, um, is there anything that you're looking out for? What are your expectations? Let us know. And my aim is to try to answer a lot of those questions that you all may have with regard to blended learning, how to get it up and running, what may be some of the tools that you might be interested in using. So, just toss it up in the chat, and I'll try to answer all of those questions as we go along the slides, yeah?
All right. It should be up there, depending. Can you adjust the stream there, Donald, to accommodate the slide?
A second. You have to load the presentation.
It's loaded.
Something's not right.
If you can, Roger, that'd be great.
All right. There you go. You seeing it?
Right.
There we go. All right, great. Cool. Okay, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Blended Learning Fundamentals. Of course, as with most tech things, you'll have a little challenge as you get things started, but we're up and running, so it's great to be here. Good to see everybody that's online and joining us today. Okay. So let's dive in. What we're going to be doing during this webinar, we're going to look at a few things. We want to look at the core concepts of blended learning. We're going to look at a few of the blended learning models. Of course, those models are different and similar, and you'd find some connection points to what you would have been doing before. So it's not like way out there, right? We're going to look at the benefits of the blended learning models. Some work in some situations. We're not saying that any one model is the best model. What we're saying is that the models are there for us to use, and looking at your situation, and we lay a few things before you, just some food for thought. So how you may leverage a particular model or combination of models to be able to achieve your objectives in transferring knowledge to your students. And then, of course, you're going to look at blended learning applications in the local school settings of Trinidad and Tobago. So just out the box, what is blended learning? It's pretty simple. Blended learning is the idea of taking one or two modes of learning, well, two or more modes of learning, bringing them together and having stuff happen. So you have your traditional learning, which is really face-to-face in class, the classroom set up a particular way and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you have the online space where there's no physical setting. It's just on a screen. Two very different modes. And what we're saying is that when you bring these together, there are a number of things that can happen that really can make the environment very interesting to work in. Challenging for some because it's moving into a new space. You don't have the students in front of you, that you could then, you could eye them down and they see your eyes and they're like, okay, cool, I need to behave. You don't have that anymore. What you have is a more distance type setting, a lot of texting and so on going on for the interaction between the students. So that fusion of that face-to-face and that online experience is really the idea of blended learning. Okay, so we're going to look at a few core concepts around this. We're going to look at time, but time kind of exists and transcends all the other spaces. You have that time factor working in the physical space, that time factor working in the blended space, the virtual space. And we're going to look at how it's being affected by the idea that pretty much the machine is always on, right? So you always have access to info. We look at the place, deciding where, students will complete their tasks, complete their lessons. I mean, traditionally, it was in the classroom, you do a number of things, and then you go home, and you may have a specific space within the house that the student does their stuff, the dining room table, or they have their little desk, and stuff like that. And then with the path, choosing how they would learn the particular content, right? Before it was, okay, books and classroom. Now we have books, classroom, and Google, among other things. But that online space, and then the opportunity to pace a little differently than you would in a traditional classroom where it's only one mode. So those are going to be 4 pivotal points that we'd be kind of rotating around and looking at how they apply with the different models and so on.
So Raj, just to come back to that, just an interesting question here back on that. Because of COVID-19, we know that place was definitely affected when it came to learning, because we were forced into the use of technology, right? And of course, I think most of the adoption that we've gotten was because of the fact that they could not go to the place they call school. So which one of the others do you think would people have even considered when they were, choosing to use technology for the classroom? Do you think that there were any others, that they were any one of these factors that they were considering outside of place?
Well, the learning path, as you raised there, the learning path would have been one of the greater things that we were taken care of, because they'd say, well, you have more of this information, and the path and pace would be 2 of the most impacted points, because now, instead of, I go to school from 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning until 2:30, 3 in the evening. So moving from that, you now have school is basically accessible 24/7. So you can now accelerate. If you're interested in a subject, you could really accelerate your pace. So that's one of the things that I thought, came up looking at my own kids here, us residing in the US. During that time, they're both in college at this point, but it was a shift. It was a little frustrating, but there was a shift because they never switched off. Right? It was difficult to switch off because your schoolwork is there, your 10 class there, and everything. So the breaks were now to, how can I get up and do something else that doesn't involve this particular piece of technology? So that pacing and path was and just all of them actually, but then managing the time became a real thing, because you study, you attend class, you do research, all in the same, practically in the same space.
Yeah, and I think also, even though pace is something that you would want to consider in a blended learning scenario, it really wasn't, because a lot of the learning just followed the same schedule that they had. They had the same deadlines and everything, so that really wasn't affected. Your exams, your tests, all assessments were done within the same time frame in most cases. So pace wasn't even considered at all.
Yeah, that's true. But the pacing for the individual and their time management, I think, was one of the bigger things that kind of came up there, because 24/7, and you had to kind of like, all right, we need to take a break, kind of an idea.
All right, nice. Thanks, Raj.
All right, great, Karen. So that gives us a nice segue. So, Karen, you could go ahead and dive in now, laying down the foundations there.
Yeah, so there are quite a number of models out there, and just to let the audience know off the bat, these are just really the generic models, or the most generic way in which you can implement any one of these models. But from my experience, as with everything that we do, we all have unique situations. We have unique structures in the way that we would be setting up our lessons in the institutes. And sure. And, these we will be talking about are really just the generic way in which some of these models would be applied. So don't be afraid, when you're thinking about implementing some kind of blended learning model, you don't have to stick to just one. You can mix and match. You could find the right balance for what you need to do. All right. So within blended learning models, we have like 4 main categories. So we have the rotation model, which would have 4 subvariants in there. We have the flex model, the a la carte, and of course the enriched virtual model. and I'm gonna jump into the rotation model as we kick off here. Yeah, Raj. All right. So the rotation model is one of the more popular ones. All right. It's really where you're looking at rotating your classroom, rotating your students across different learning activities. So whether it be some kind of group work, individual training, etc., even assignments, you can rotate your students across these different learning activities within the space. One of the reasons why the rotation model has really been successful is because you don't really need to do too much. Like with regard to time, the time pretty much remains the same. All you really, with regard to your training schedule, all that really changes is, your integration of technology for certain activities. So like if you're doing an assessment, instead of giving them pen and paper, you could probably have a Google form with a quiz. Or you could use something that an app on a mobile device that allows them to sit in and do the assignment, right? So it can be as simple as that, and you would have a rotation model up and running. All right. So it really is very quick and easy to implement, and it's usually one of the first stages. The using a rotation model would be usually like if you're now thinking about getting into blended learning, that may be one of the routes that you'll take, because it just kind of easing the technology into the learning environment. Yeah.
Karen, as you said, a possible app. You have things like Komoot and a number of other little apps that are free. That it becomes kind of like a little game. So you have that gamification of the environment, that then helps the student to really get engaged. And that's a big thing for Shiva. Shiva thinks, is one of the things that after we came together as a company, that was a big thing for us. We wanted to move the area so that, you always enjoy playing games, but you learn a lot about life in the games that we played growing up. And continue to play even as adults. So yeah.
One of the things that I really do enjoy about exploring blended learning options for school, I put myself in the place of the student, and if I was a student, like when I was a student, these are the kinds of things I would have wanted to be done in school, and it's really best in that secondary school environment, because I think they love tech so much, they'll be willing to jump in. They already have that positive disposition on it. And I think Yuva has I'm certain that he has some ideas in terms of how
I can't tell you
how he will implement it.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because I just wanted to say I do love the whole idea and concept behind the rotation models. We have tried to use it, but I can tell you, based on timing and just resources, it's not able to be fully implemented as we would want it to be, right? We're able to, and I can honestly tell you, based on past experiences, we are able to implement that rotation model in a very limited aspect.
Nice.
Okay. So I mean, there's a start point, and it's actually just getting there and trying that, and trying the different models. As you try the different models, we'll be able to then, we get some benefit out of the different models, test it and see how it works. And that's one of the things, as Yuva mentioned there, try it. We tried this, it didn't work that great, or there's some tweaks that we would need to make and stuff like that. All right.
Nice. Yeah, so the station rotation is pretty much where we allow students themselves to rotate through various quote-unquote stations on this fixed schedule, where at least one of those activities is pretty much an online experience. So as you can see there, we have the online instruction, you'll have your teacher-led instruction, which they're used to, and then of course you'll have your normal collaborative activities. Now, of course, any one of these could actually implement technology. So what they're talking about here is like, some things may accommodate like the entire classroom as one, or it could break them into smaller groups or major segments, and even one-on-one. So as I said, the rotation model has a nice amount of flexibility, but as I said, the flexibility is more with regard to rotating your students within your fixed schedule and accommodating technology with it. All right. Yeah. Now, the next model that I'm going to look at, which is the lab rotation. Yeah, Raj, you could go ahead. Right. It is very, very similar to your station rotation. But online learning takes place at separate locations. So instead of it only being in one environment where you just basically rotating them within a shared space, you can allow the group to be separated. And of course, this basically adds more flexibility, all right, to the model, because you get online learning now happening. So you can actually have your instructor-led stuff within the classroom. You could send them maybe even home or to a recreational area to deal with some of the other lessons. And then, of course, you could even have your assessments back in the classroom. So you have a little more flexibility than just the station rotation, where it just kind of keeps the environment the same or the place the same. You can actually vary the place with the lab rotation. All right. So all the benefits that apply to the normal rotation models will apply here as well. Yeah.
Cool. So we see that whole rotation idea is kind of one of the pivotal points, shifting the students through the process, right? So it's turning up in different styles of really shifting the student and giving the student an opportunity to look and review and be part of a particular process. So this is really cool.
Yeah. The nice thing about implementing blended learning is the fact that you are no matter which model you choose, even if you go with a generic one or you go with some kind of hybrid approach that integrates one or more of these, you are really seeking to enrich the learning experience for the student, and you are seeking to tap into their various learning styles and tap into their general preferences so that you can get them more engaged. That's the whole onus behind the pivotal role of blended learning now. So when we talk about the flipped classroom, I know that this has generally been one of the more popular approaches among all blended learning options. I've been familiar with all of these for a while, but what you usually hear out there, as the first approach has usually been the flipped classroom, where we think about basically it's a role reversal. Yeah, we have the students exploring the new content outside of the classroom, and then using the classroom environment to pretty much discuss what they have learned. I know that within the traditional sense of education, it has usually been the instructor-led side of learning, where the material has been shared and they get to digest it, and then they go home to do an assessment to really practice it and apply it, etc. So the flipped classroom really kind of flips it over and puts more onus on the student to really explore and learn the content and then bring their learning to the classroom. All right. Of course, the teacher's role is really to guide learners. And one thing about this, I think Yuva might be able to add something here, because I think it really has a lot to do, not with the use of technology in this case, but with regard to how the teacher will manage the class and how they will guide and lead the students towards, actually motivating and driving them to explore the material. What do you think there, Yuva?
Well, what I was actually going to share with you, it's funny you said with the whole get towards more student-centered. For a greater part of 10 years, the DPED program has been trying to train teachers to go towards a more what they call student-centered learning, right? Where the teachers, or we should say the educators, they take on more of the role of a guide, right? Now, what I can tell you about the flipped classroom model, especially, well, as you all know, for those of us listening, tuning in and so forth, that the kids are back out, right? There is physical classes taking place in some form or fashion. Some kids are out every day. In the secondary schools, there's a staggered system, if you would, where some days they're out, some days they're not. And I can tell you for a fact, the only way that we are able to try to get our content done in a timely manner is by utilizing the flipped classroom model, right? Myself, as well as many other colleagues, we will post up our notes on our Google Classroom, Edmodo, whatever platform we would have used in the past, right? That we would have had access to in the past. We'd have used those, posted the notes, and then scramble, make sure, and then when the kids come out, then we tackle it in class, right? What do you understand by the core concepts here? What do you understand that these concepts we're trying to teach you? So I can tell you, yeah, out of a lot of the models that you're going to go through with us today, the one that's probably being utilized currently, and maybe some teachers, educators may not even realize that they're using it, is this model in particular.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I like how you share that experience, because in my experience as well, because I also lecture at the BSc and MBA levels, where I use the flipped classroom model a lot, because it allows our students to go look at the material, let's come and have some meaningful discussions, because of course we don't have a lot of face-to-face time or online time together in a live synchronous environment. So there's only so much you could talk about in a 3-hour lecture or something like that. And what a little tip for you, Yuva, as well as some of the other educators out there, you don't always have to create all of your content. The syllabus, yes, we have the CSEC, we have the other syllabus that we use in the region, but there's a lot of learning content out there. You don't have to always create every single thing before you start doing a model like this. There's so much open courseware resources out there. I could probably share a list after, in a post on LinkedIn or something after, based on the subject matter. You have a ton of stuff out there, especially for STEM subjects. So if you're looking at STEM, you're looking even at English stuff. We have you have Stanford, you have MIT, you have Harvard. Some of these guys tossing out a lot of cool content, and of course, a lot of them will still align to the basic material that you would be covering as well within CSEC. So and there's a lot of open libraries out there as well with learning content. So I think I need to sit and compile all these things, and maybe yes, we'll definitely do a post to share access to a lot of those resources. But in truth and in fact, when you're setting up something like this and you have to create material for them to access outside of the classroom, it can become daunting. But hey, that's only the first time. After you do it, the lovely thing about this is that material is reusable. So you go through it the first time, you integrate some, you put some more next semester, you put some more again, and you're going to have this huge library of online content that it makes your life as an educator a bit easier. Not easier in the sense of the teaching part, but easier in the sense that you can actually have the opportunity to give students more than what they were getting in the traditional environment. Yeah. So yeah, the flipped classroom has a lot of advantages, and as we step into the other models, you'll see how we kind of place other things on top of the rotation model to enhance it even more for the student. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's one of the things there with the flipped classroom too. How can I put this? You want to kind of pay attention to where you're making your links to, because as you'd have content storage, where you have an official learning environment, so maybe papers and so on. Having worked in the higher academic space, developing master's programs and so on, you'd want you really want them to go look.
Yeah.
So let them go look. So to the point that you're making, where you're not creating all the content from scratch, you can reference solid papers that have been written on the subjects. It strengthens, even at the secondary school level, it strengthens their ability to do research. So it now becomes something that they would go into university with, being able to go out and do research. My wife and I, when the kids were in secondary school back home in TNT, anytime they had a problem, we would discuss with them, and they would have to. They learned to use Google and other, areas very, very early, which augured very well for them.
Yeah.
In terms of just moving forward. So the idea of research needs to be kind of brought in there, where as you flip the classroom, you don't have to go and put everything online for them. You could point them to resources, or have them answer some of the questions, knowing that there are resources out there. So you could do your research as a teacher, so it's there. They just have to go find it, but where it is. So it's just somewhere where they need to go, and they can go there and find it. So that's really cool.
Perfect. You create the part for them, yeah.
Yeah, create the part for them.
Nice. Well, the individual rotation is basically the same as the other rotation models, but this one is actually a bit more tailored for each individual student. So this one gets a bit more granular. So there's a lot more, let's say, personalization with regard to the path. So where the others we were talking about, like with the station rotation and the lab rotation, there were fixed schedules. We do have some fixed schedules there, but the control with regard to the path that they would take, and of course, which activities they could get involved in, because individuals don't necessarily need to do everything that's offered within the learning environment or even in the classroom. So not every student will have to visit every station to be able to learn something. It's all about, of course, the cool thing about blended learning, while we would integrate assessments and all these things, we are more focused on the objective, which is, of course, the learning transfer and the performance. So how they do it is not really too much of a concern. The main thing is, was the knowledge transferred, and are they able to complete successfully, whatever we put out for them to assess their knowledge and to assess the learning transfer. So this gives a little more power to the student, but it still follows some of the core tenets of the rotation model. And I think when we jump to the next one, which I think is the flex there, Raj, I think that's where we start getting a little more, personalized. Right?
Just before we jump forward, I wanted to kind of just stay. Whoops, let's go backward here. Sorry. I'm going forward. Sorry.
No, I don't think those buttons kicking in orange. Just
I don't think the buttons are kicking in either. So here we go. There we are. Right. So this is one of the core things in terms of the things that we're trying to do at IDFACT. We really want to look at this individual, and it starts with this, kind of looking at, well, what will actually help that individual learn, and understanding the individual and being able to then work with them and provide the teacher the tools to make this, because there are a number of teachers, I know myself included, that you want to spend some more time with the individual, because you see that they probably have some potential, but they're struggling. And it may be with just one little area in the subject matter, but then that is a foundational area that the rest of the stuff that they need to build on.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to get that individual tailoring going on. And within that space, it could provide a little bit of a challenge. So, we're looking at developing tools that will help support the teacher in that individual space. And this is the beginning of working it down, as you said, there, Karen, where we're getting into the flex model, where we start to look at, start having some real fun. So we've laid the foundation there with the different rotation models, and now we're going to start blending things up a little more.
And just kind of tossing it out to the guys in the audience. Have you all ever, applied any form of technology within the classroom? What have you all explored so far, or are you all complete noobs when it comes to using technology, and you've never even considered it, or you probably want to use it, but hey, it's not there? Talk to me. Yeah. While those guys dropping in on the comments, let's talk about the flex. And what the flex model does is it's really all about creating that flexibility. So think about it. You are moving students, but now, rather than the fixed scheduling that we have within the rotation model, you have a little more flexibility when it comes to the time frame and the scheduling, right? So online learning is really central at this point, because the student has a lot more control, and the teacher involvement is more like if I need the teacher. So the teacher is more only to provide support like when they're needed, rather than being the primary source of content and instruction. So it's kind of like, when we talk about the flipped classroom model, where we talk about the shift from sage on the stage to guide on the side, right? So this is more that guide from the side, but it's kind of like an optional guide. It's kind of like one of those little notifications that popping up. Hey, do you need anything? And you can click like, oh no, and you could just continue on your journey as a student. So teachers do provide the support. Teachers are there to provide general guidance, and of course to provide the overall structure with regard to what should be learned and when you should be ready with some of these things. So they have that flexibility, yes, but it's a guided type of flexibility, and they'll only require that face-to-face instruction when they think they really need it, right? So I think one of the good things about this, what I've learned, implementing stuff like this, where we give students a lot of we empower students a lot, is that you get to collect a ton more data than any other blended model, because you are now seeing patterns of behavior. You are now seeing a lot of really juicy data stores that could give you a lot more insight on your student behavior, what they're learning best at, what they're not learning best at, because sometimes you ask your students for feedback and you don't really get the feedback you're looking for. But by collecting this this type of data in terms of how they behave, we get a lot more knowledge about our students than we would ever get from them telling us, or giving us direct feedback.
So this gives us more modes of observation that we could then leverage in really tailoring the environment to really empower the student.
Yeah.
Right? You're seeing all the pieces here, and this is where we're getting to really moving to an environment where the student begins to really take center stage. And within this environment, I think one of the things that we can't overemphasize would be that where's the parent in this whole thing, right? So that the parent now becomes really part of the action. So they're now joining with the teacher to really encourage and support that student going forward, and ensuring that the student the tools, but primarily emotional support to go forward and know that they can make those choices, right? Because this, as you said, is very student-centric, and it then creates a space where the student now has the opportunity to grow, not just academically, but really to mature as a person, making decisions in terms of how they and where they want to go and how they want to move.
Yeah. And you have me thinking there as well in terms of some of the points you made, and of course with this question that was posed by Kishan, are there any challenges with group projects with regard to timelines and not having a backlog on course content? I think there will always be challenges with regard to group projects. What I have learned with a lot of my students is that I've created general guidelines for them with regard to code of conduct and how they should communicate. And of course, if your virtual learning environment has various modes of communication, of course you could use tools like, well, we know the ever popular WhatsApp. You have Teams if they're willing to pay for it, but you also have like Slack and Flock, which are free alternatives, and they could allow for that group collaboration. Some of the challenges we would see is that students have, of course, we all know students have all these various learning styles. And then, of course, we have the morning people, the evening people, the ones who start work immediately versus the ones who start later. What I usually recommend and what has worked for work like that, especially group assignments in the past, has been allow them that, let them understand what are the decisions they need to make as a group with regard to what they need to submit, etc. And what are some of the decisions they need to make as a group to get to move forward with the work that they have to do. And what I've also suggested, which has worked as well, is allow a 12 or 24-hour cycle time with regard to the decision, because not every student might be live for a meeting or something like that to discuss synchronously with other students, So what will happen? They toss up the question, they toss up the decision they have to make, get consensus from those who are live, and then the others who didn't make it live have, this 12-hour period to kind of review, add their 2 cents. And when that 12-hour period reaches, they just move forward with whatever feedback they've received. So that way, everyone is invited to add value to the decision. But if they don't all make it, you can't really sit and wait for it, because, of course, time waits for no man and assignments wait for nobody, right? So, kind of moving forward with that. So I think that's a nice question though. And the not having a backlog on the course content, maybe you could add some more detail on that for me so that I could add that to the response. Yeah. Oh, that's great, Faith, you got a goal started. I love that. Yeah.
YouTube videos and Kahoot quizzes from Lisa. Yeah.
Kahoot is the bomb. All right. There are a couple others. Was it Quizlet? I'm trying to remember the other one.
Quizlet. Kahoot is one of the more popular ones. I think because it has a free tier that's pretty easy to set it up, and it's fairly interactive, so it's a lot of fun. But
free. Right? Listen, free adds a flavor that money just can't
buy.
And there's so much tools out there, and they're so easy to create with regard to if you think about what you really want, and this is part of the reason why we kind of all came together trying to see how we could use all our expertise to really kind of build something that people would want. Definitely, Simon, thanks for adding to to the chat there. Zoom
Zoom
whiteboard.
whiteboard.
I think it's one of the most underutilized elements within Zoom. I know a lot of people who use Zoom. It's very popular, but not a lot of people use the whiteboard.
True.
But
Not a lot of people use. Not a lot of people use Jamboard either, which is what's provided with Google. So you can use a Jamboard in Google Meet. You also have the same
yes,
whiteboards. I think the challenge of using a whiteboard is that they're probably thinking that, in fact, they may not realize it's there. That's one. But two, not they're sitting down at a machine, so they're not really thinking. I have a blackboard I could scribble stuff on.
Yes.
It's just called a whiteboard in this situation. But just addressing that other question too that was raised earlier in terms of the backlog of course contents, it kind of ties back to the developing the maturity of the individual, because what is happening is that they now have to think about how do I actually work with others, right? So that we can all get things done. And that was one of the things, even my daughters here, that's one of the challenges they met. They're concerted learners, so they would put in the effort. If there's a group project, they go all in. And then you have people who will kind of not be and they just turn up on the last day of the project and all that kind of stuff. So okay, cool. That's what then happens, Kishan, as you're raising there, the backlog, of course, having a fixed completion date and delays and stuff from group inputs and so on. So they learn to then deal with the actual management of a small project.
Yeah.
They're managing, say, put a group leader, particularly in the high school, secondary school level, you want to put in a group leader so that they understand what needs to happen. And the first few times they'll have those laggards.
well, Raj, okay. in especially for the secondary school level, you have two leaders. And then you always have a backup for you have a contingency for every role. So basically everybody in the team will be focusing on two different roles, one as their core, one as their secondary. And I think, Ishan, what I've done there with regard to talking about the cycle time for decisions, basically is the concept of time boxing, right? So you time box certain decisions and allow them to say, hey, we're going to do this by tomorrow. And even if not everyone might be available live, but you let them have the discussions, let them talk about, get that consensus live, and then allow the others to fall in over the period. And at the end of that cycle, move forward with whatever decision that you all have made. And then, of course, everybody, usually what I also allow students to do is have a final lessons learned at the end. So when they do the assignment, you still have that lessons learned where they share what they've learned, share their experience. And it helps me understand what they went through so that I could provide further guidance to other students or even to that same group as well. Because sometimes a group might remain as a group for an entire semester or an entire term. So we can actually allow that. I think that name familiar, I don't remember Simon well. She was actually one of my students. So I think he might be able to attest to some of the things that we actually did and how I tormented them for, a whole year. Right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we got another comment from Lisa, in terms of breakout rooms and stuff like that, which is true. That's one of the other things. You also have that in Meet. You have that in a number of the more sophisticated platforms like Teams and so on and stuff that you could then utilize to really, do the rotation, set them off on those things, put them into groups so that they could work. I think one of the things that comes up again with leveraging that kind of space is that the students now actually, students and the teachers now actually have to address the idea of how do you help, teenagers, in our case, dealing with the secondary school space, how do you help teenagers actually understand what, project management and how to work in a group, right? And, that you're not just working for yourself, you're working for the group. And everybody needs to, as they would say, pull their weight, right? You can't have any laggards on board.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
So, Google Forms has been one of the go-to because you can actually create the quiz within a Google form. There are a few other tools. I'm trying to remember them off the top. I'm looking at some web forms, and I've used, quizzes and stuff on LearnDash. Of course, LearnDash is one of those plugins that you use on WordPress and stuff. But Google Forms work very, very well because it's able to handle a lot of numbers. And of course, once you set it up, and it's very, very quick and easy to set up. You could set up a quiz on Google Forms. If let's say if it's a 15 question or 20 question quiz, you could have that up and running within half an hour. Maybe even less, and I'm just using half an hour. If it is, you have to create a Google account and you have to go there, But if you already have, your Google account and stuff, it's really quick and easy. And I think one of the best parts about it is accessible. So we have a lot of tools out there within virtual learning environments, and they're not always easily accessible by students. And a lot of the Google tools out there are pretty handy as well, right?
One of the nice things in terms of that form thing with Google Forms, you could actually back end it into a nice little spreadsheet. And
in Google Sheets, and you could analyze it.
Google Sheets, and then have some real fun in terms of kind of understanding a little more about your students, run some stats and stuff like that. So that's.
I think what I'll do, guys, for those in the chat, I'm liking the questions, and even though we don't have all the time in the world to deal with all the questions in terms of heavy detail. But what I will do, Lisa, a lot of these questions I'm gonna write like a short post, and we will post it through EduSite. So I will share some of those other tools and maybe even give you some feedback with regard to my experience with some of those tools and what can be recommended based on the level and the classes that you're teaching. Yeah. So Lisa, you could always check out the post on the page. You could follow us, subscribe, and stuff like that. And you could always ask further questions. And we could have a chat sometime. So that's not a problem. Yeah.
Let me just quickly interject there, Karen. I just want to share something from my personal experience as well.
Nice.
Edmodo, right? Edmodo a lot of it's good for multiple choice marking. Now, here's one thing I will tell like our listeners that Edmodo had above Google Forms. Now, one of the shortcomings I have realized with Google Forms is that once the students get the link for the exam, but like for multiple choice exam, they can share that file, or God forbid if the child has a duplicate or multiple Gmail accounts, they can access that same exam multiple times. That's actually, and the reason why it is I can tell you because that has happened to me.
Yeah. So this is the other challenge with the online environment. There are a number of additional tools that the teachers need to then learn. Being one of them.
But the beautiful thing about Edmodo, now Edmodo can only authorize it. So Edmodo sets up the online classroom, so something similar we do it, and only persons in the classroom could access the exam, and you as the teacher could control who is in the classroom or not. If you understand what I'm getting at.
There are some security features within Google Form quizzes as well, that would allow only that also. And of course, if you're doing it through a Google Classroom, well, then only those who have access to the classroom will have access to the quiz also.
I thought so too.
There's a security in the settings.
It's not configured properly, and that's the other challenge in terms of so the technology departments are definitely going to be under the gun a little more, because things like that in terms of configuring the classroom are really, really critical to being able to utilize the security features and being able to really leverage that blended learning environment. Google can shut things out. In fact, at one time, I'd set some stuff up and the students couldn't access the classroom, even though they were in the classroom, because I had changed some of the security parameters. The security is pretty strong, but it requires a deft hand to set it right, so that when others outside the class, you could actually check the number of times that somebody accessed the exam. You could, even if it's the same ID, you could lock it down so they only have one chance. You can lock down the timing on the form if they go past a certain time, you could actually shut the form. Right. So there are a number of things in it. It's pretty powerful. And this is one of the challenges with the blended learning model moving into the technology space. teachers, it looks easy at the beginning, and it's pretty simple to get in. The challenge here now is you have a lot more moving parts that don't obviously show themselves. So having a technology person or technology view on, as part of your team is useful. I mean, and that's one of the things that we provide in terms of that technology advice and helping you secure and harden some of the systems and so on, so that you don't have the challenges that Uvers has experienced. And I'm sure other teachers have experienced. I mean, I've had teachers up here really complain about Canva and some other things, because the students literally did that. They circumvented the whole thing and went and passed out exam answers. I mean, it was a real riot. So it's
No,
like,
I think we have to understand that these kids are very, very savvy. So as a facilitator, as a teacher, you need to really have a team with you to understand this thing first, in terms of what settings are there, what restrictions are possible, what can we do to ensure that they aren't, all our work, the efforts are not circumvented by those who might be savvy. So yeah, definitely. When you are planning and looking at the tools as well, part of the research, which we could even advise, when people have their questions, is what are some of the things you need to consider when you are implementing blended learning solutions. Yeah, but yeah, that all. I've heard a ton of stories, and I've experienced some of these things as well. Kids are they're magical with these things. So you don't ever think twice that they're not gonna be able to circumvent something. It's always possible. All right. Of course, the a la carte model. This model really it's formally known as the self blend. So if anybody's doing research, you'll come across the self blend model. In other spaces, you'll come across the a la carte. But this is where you're talking about, you are looking at the face-to-face, you're looking at dealing with the teacher, and that's more the primary source of knowledge. But students can now go on and do their own courses, do their own things on the side to really supplement what they are learning from the face-to-face or the online classes, etc. It's really all about the self-blend. Is basically an individual blending themselves in terms of which path they want to follow, but still following the overall core path that was set to them by the educator. This I would know a lot about this, because this is pretty much something that I allow tertiary level students to do. So you'll see that the point, it's more useful at higher levels, but it allows them to explore and discover. And discovery has always been one of the added advantages of incorporating blended learning, because in the classroom environment, they are very dependent on the teacher. So, as kind of like the sole provider with one or two other resources in the school, etc. But when you hit blended learning and you start hitting these types of models, you allow them to go down the path of discovery, to find material that the teacher may never even have found for them. They find it, learn it their way, bring it back to the classroom environment, bring it back to the understanding that the teacher wants them to have on it, and then apply themselves within the assessments and be able to be successful. So there is a high degree of student control here, basically like the Flex, but a little more personalized than the Flex. Yeah,
I think, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So a good point there, Karen, in terms of the idea that the student is going and getting information and then sharing that information with the rest of the class and even with the teacher, in that this is stuff that the teacher may or may not have seen before. So everybody's learning. And I think conceptually, teachers need to be in the space where they're learning and they recognize that they're learning from the students, not necessarily in the subject matter there, because they're the subject matter expert, but other methods and other things that are coming within that subject space is constantly going to be moving. And the real thing is that they're living online. So they probably see more stuff than we would. The other part of that, though, in terms of this, it's really that guidance to the student. Because one of the challenges at the higher level is that you would be teaching a university level class, and you have to kind of, they're expecting you to kind of pour out everything. And I deal with boot camps and other things like that, and even in higher development, corporate training and stuff like that. And if the person isn't really inclined what you find that is that they wouldn't go out and learn anything, and then they come back and they expect you to tell them what needs to go on. I mean, just earlier today, we were working out one of those challenges, and all I did was provide them links. They were expecting me to sit down and work out everything for them. That is not how this works.
Yeah.
How are then you're going to go out and use what you thought that you learned unless you actually do it, right? So
Yeah.
it's really this. And if we look at it, the last two are really to move toward a space where we develop better human beings, which is the whole drive behind our philosophy.
Yeah.
Right? I would affect the space, right? If you look at it, it's right in our name. I would affect the space.
Yeah, and I think Raj, we need to invite Faith to have a chat with us, because Faith looks like a real superstar in terms of what's being done in the classroom environment. Faith, good going.
Oh,
I like that.
okay, all right. I'm now seeing.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Faith to challenge us with a really nice question. I feel Faith might have some really good questions out there.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So this is one of the key things, and this is around how we engage, how we engage, how we provide support for schools. In terms of working along with the educational structure, working around helping them choose tools, and some of the stuff that we're building that would be in the market pretty soon. We've done some testing and stuff like that, and it really does.
So as you raise that there, Raj, sorry.
Yeah, we're really working
raise
to
that there,
incorporate all these key things here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you had raised that point there, Raj. Faith, what I was looking at was the ability of this to automate as much as possible. I know that you would have to go through their inputs and then kind of look at certain keywords and give them the scores. The aim with trying to automate as much as possible with regard to short answers, their keywords, key phrases that the system could look for, and then even recommend to you, hey, this score is 3 out of 5 with regard to this short answer, and provide a highlight in terms of what they picked up from what the potential the most appropriate answer should be, and then you could review it. So you have the system basically making recommendations to you, and of course learning from that with regard to what students are answering and what type of words they are using based on what you input as the ideal response or variations of the ideal response. So yeah, those types of things could actually be automated. I was looking at the analytics for it and the models for it. So it's certainly something that will be explored in terms of easing you up with some of the manual workflow that you'll have to do there. Yeah, but thanks for sharing.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so of course, last but not least, right? The Enrich Virtual really I think builds upon a lot of things here. We're talking about with a la carte. A la carte was more like that individual type of journey, right? Think of it like from a rotation model, you have the individual rotation where it's an individual learner on a fixed schedule, etc. And the a la carte was more like this individual journey, but more a little more personalized. It kind of leveled up on top of the rotation model. The Enrich Virtual is more of an holistic experience. It's a little more. So it's not just focused on an individual journey, but it's focused on the entire environment. How are we doing this for a multitude of students? All right. So it is not like course by course. We're actually doing it for an entire program or an entire syllabus and stuff like that. So this is really like, you continue to level up and build upon each of these models. And then you could incorporate, bits and pieces of the models within what you're doing at certain levels, and it's always based, I think is what's very important, even as Yuval and Roger and I were talking earlier about, some of the things that these tech savvy kids could do is really all about having the right team with the right skills to say, hey, we could do this. We could set this up properly. We could, have enough time to test it too. You have to be patient when you're setting up these things. It's not an overnight fix. Learning and integrating a model for learning will affect behavior. So behavior isn't something that changes overnight. It's certainly something that you need to monitor over time, see what's working. We can't tell you. I could probably tell you with enough experience, with my experience, that you tell me a scenario and I can say, well, okay, yeah, maybe maybe the a la carte could work here, or maybe the lab rotation could work here. But remember, your environment has, different types of students, different types of teachers. So we kind of drop it in, see what's going on, see where the successes are, see where we fall in short, and make adjustments. And that's where the hybrid approach comes in, because we can mix and match certain things to get this holistic solution to work, and not just work generally, but work for your institute, work for you and this scenario. So even with different teachers in different classes, you could have totally different environments because of the cultures that a teacher would build within those learning environments. Yeah.
So within your organization, within your school, what we're looking at is, and as Karen was laying out there, that all the models are great. They have their different strengths, but it's really tuning it to your environment. And this is one of the things that we would help any organization do in terms of tuning it to your environment. But we're going to lay on some groundwork here. This is, if you wanted to really start to maximize your learning environment, I know COVID has tossed a number of organizations a serious curveball, as they would say, a real good spinner. Right? When you're playing cricket and you come down and the man even look as if the hand turn, it looking as if it's a good bit of pace coming there, and then the ball drop and go on. So, you're like, ugh. So COVID throws us some good spinners there, and in some cases some high performing pace, right? But you set the goals, right? And that's the key thing. Without the goals, you really can't move forward because you have no target to hit, right? So you want to kind of, I mean, it's okay to set lofty goals. You may need to step back and then readjust, but set the goals, so at least you have a target, right? And once you set your target, you can then look at, well, okay, what best helps us meet that target? And that's one of the key things that we would be willing to provide you also support with, in terms of helping you meet whatever target that you set. If you don't know what target to set, we can help you with the target setting thing too, right? So set the target, choose a model. When you choose a model, and as Karen was saying, the key thing is the team around you, right? Because you have key concerns in terms of security, particularly with these creative students that we have now. Remember, I mean, the first time I saw a computer, I actually had my own computer, was probably around, I was 12 or 13 at the time. I got my first computer. It was so my age will show at this point, was a Radio Shack. With the little, and you use tape, the little cassette tape to actually do the programming on. That was my very first machine, right? And that was in my early teenage, right? But you're looking at kids who grew up 5, 6. They're already playing a machine that's way more powerful than that little Radio Shack and the little TRS-80 and stuff that I was using, right? The phone is way more powerful than that could I ever dream to be, and they're playing around with those things. That is how they live. So they've really grown up in a space where technology is how they operate. So you need to then get expertise to match that skill set, or at least think in the space and help you set up things to help corral and keep things going in the right direction. And of course, we will also help you. I mean, we have several learning specialists on board that have been in the business of helping people, really empowering people with learning, right, to help redesign the learning space. So looking at the different models, right, you can choose a model, as Karen said, but then you have to figure out whether that model will work with you. So we set up the structure around which we could then evaluate and treat with the metrics that's coming out, right? So the analysis that Karen was talking about there, we'll be able to then look at that and say, well, hey, this is actually working well, or this is not working so well, or we're not getting any movement on this side. So that may be something that we then need to pay more attention to or move around. So help you redesign that after you do a few tests and so on, and then say, well, okay, good, cool. This is how we're organizing and maintaining the learning process. All right. So this is some of the space that we tend to be able to help you guys in, and this is some of the things that we just wanted to put on the table. Right?
And Raj, just to add to that is, I think a very pivotal point in this whole process is really the redesigning of the learning. What I've seen a lot, especially like when people would come to me and ask me, hey, we see you doing this and we want to get it done. I mean, we want some assistance. That's great. I would help anybody who's asking for it, especially when it comes to, tech and learning and trying to amplify, your reach and all these things. What I see as one of the biggest mistakes that are being made is that we tend to want to take the same lesson the way we were doing it traditionally and just say, oh, put it on PowerPoint slides or put it here or make a short video and, it's going to work because, hey, we're using technology and kids love tech. But what we need to realize is that when you are redesigning learning for a blended space, you have to change the way in which it's being taught, change the way in which the conversation will flow, change how you're going to express certain topics because you now have what we'll call the multimodal option, where you could incorporate a whole bunch of different modalities, as I say, of course, techniques, video, audio, all kinds of stuff to accommodate all the different learning styles. So it does allow you to now kind of think, you have to more go back in terms of what the learning objectives are. Go back to the base. Don't think about the lesson itself in terms of the learning content, but think about what the learning objective is. And then we could reframe the content to ensure that it reaches the student, and this is where, micro content and all these little things will come into play. So you could, instead of having like a 3-hour class on a certain topic, you could have half an hour of material, a 5-minute video, some audio to listen to, maybe a PDF document for them to go through for details. And you could have that done very quickly. But it does require a lot more planning with regard to the redesigning of the content. So it's certainly a consideration. Yeah, Yuval, what do you think about that?
No, I agree. I do.
Yeah, and of course I know I see you sweating there. I know it's a lot of effort, but after you go through that effort and you set it up, it basically allows you to streamline your learning. It gives you the time and the opportunity to go through the data and get more insight and improve it. Because of course, the thing with this is there's no one and done kind of deal here. After you do this and you see the results and you get whatever, you start seeing how it's being done, you could start adjusting. So it's a continuous improvement model that you're on. And you could never stagnate and say, okay, this is what working and we're going to do this for the next 20 years. It doesn't work like that. It's all about learning from it and making adjustments.
Right.
Okay, well, I like this question. I knew it would have come up at some point in time, social media. My take on it is, in the same way we allow them to discover, I think in certain cases we need to hold their hands with regard to what they're going to be exploring. So, Faith, like what I usually do with some of my groups, I would point them to like certain YouTube channels that they should subscribe to that would focus on certain learning content. So I think, yes, you could allow them to use it, but you have to kind of you're not moderating live, but you are pointing them down a direction where it's going to add value to them. YouTube generally, not necessarily TikTok. I haven't really found any kind of material that I think could be useful on TikTok. But I don't know. Have you found anything on TikTok that you found useful for students?
Food.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, some of the so they have a number of people on TikTok that actually put some good stuff up, and my daughters have a tendency of finding this stuff and then they'd send it to me, right? And they also have some guys that do some stuff in all areas. You have people getting up on TikTok and saying or doing whatever. So it's a space that shouldn't be ignored because they're probably going to go anyway.
Yeah.
So the key thing here is helping them, and it comes back to the other fundamentals that we were talking about, right? In terms of helping the student think, helping the student become a better all-round person, so that they could evaluate the content, right? I mean, yes, they're young and their brains are still developing. My wife always reminds me of this. They don't have a whole brain yet. That was one of the statements my father-in-law used to make, actually. No, they don't have a whole brain yet. So, the expectation is not very high. They will do dumb stuff, right? Accepting that as a reality, we need to then kind of say, well, this is how this kind of the stuff that you'd want to look at on YouTube. And as you said there, you'd suggest, channels they should subscribe to, which would give them really good content. So, that's leveraging the social media space to help them understand how they can leverage these spaces, because in many cases the response is just no, they can't go on YouTube, no, they can't do this, no, they can't do that. And because the brain is developing, the child will ask why. Right, they will ask why. And given in this
I think Raj, you made a really nice, that's a really nice point in terms of the why question. And this is when you're thinking about learning content in terms of not just what but why. And we get that question a lot, especially with this younger generation. They are more curious. They are, what can I say? They're more bold-faced, right? And so just tying it back, Faith, with that question. As an educator, as a trainer, as a facilitator, it is our role and responsibility to explore these channels and find the useful content. And once we find that content, drive the students down there. We know that they would not avoid social media. They're always going to be there. But at least if they are there, let them engage with something that's more productive, that's something that they could learn from, right? Oh, well, the automated grading software, I came across different parts of it in different spaces, but what I was talking about was actually a model that I was looking at building out with regard to looking for the keywords and letting the system pick it up and give you the recommendation, because I found bits and pieces of it in different software, especially the paid stuff, but not to the level that I would have wanted. So I kind of got it halfway in a K-12 software, and then I'll kind of see some recommendations being done in another software, and then I'll be like, well, if they had both together. So this is where I started exploring. So Faith, probably I could always share with you guys a thesis document that I did like over 10 years ago, where I looked at learning analytics, building a model of Amazon and Netflix. So I use the same kind of model, but for a learning environment, and allow the students to customize their journey and their quizzes and stuff. So it's kind of based off something like that I was inspired by way back when, and I just never found the time to build it out. So I'm now exploring it because we have tons of enabling technology out there, like natural language processing models, already kind of all over the place. So yeah, we can actually do that. Well, yeah, that's great for you. See, as I was just saying, you have to find it. I think as the educator, we need to put that onus on ourselves and that responsibility. We could find them, and we could share them with the classroom. So as I said, if your child has to go to the playground, you don't want them hanging out with the guys on the block, but you want them to hang out with the proper kids on the swing. So we point them in the direction where they should go. We know they won't avoid the playground, but let's put them somewhere where it could actually make them more productive, give them some kind of positive influence. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that goes a long way, really that guidance. And I think this is one of the things that we were kind of alluding to, the parent being part of the whole process. And that's one of the things that, in terms of the stuff that we're building, the kind of platforms that we're going to be putting out in a short while, would be one of those things that's going to be there, where the parent has an opportunity to really be part of that learning process, right? And so great stuff there again by Faith, in terms of where you produce video, you see videos and stuff online, and guiding them to these videos so that they know that it's okay. It's you got to look at how you're using it. So key things here in terms of the things that we looked at, right? I think has been coming out in the last set of discussions here, and the questions and so on being raised about, well, okay, where can we get grading stuff and stuff like that? It's coming out that is a major fusion of the traditional and the online experiences. And with that major fusion, you have a number of challenges that come along with it, security being one of them, risk to the students, risk to the classroom. So we have a number of things there that would be coming out of it. You have the student driven. It's more toward students. It's more toward helping the student really become a whole person and guide themselves or leverage the environment for their betterment, right? So that's student driven development. And then the implementation, which is a real challenge, right? With all the things that are going on, how do we implement? Which models do we implement? How does the blooding solution work? How do we secure the environment given all the other things that's going on? How do we guide the students to use of the social media platforms for learning as part of as part of a normal way to get around and get through and go forward. So this is some of the key things that we'd want you guys to kind of just contemplate on. And as you were saying there, feel free to comment even after we've posted the video, after the live session, and there are a number of things that we're putting on the site as we go forward, related to this session, and just continual stuff that, out of some of the questions. Karen already have homework to go and do.
Well, not really homework, but more to compile it, because it's around, I know them, I've come across them.
Yeah, but it's still homework, man.
But yeah, not in one location.
I like that you use compile, because with the environment, you want them to be constantly learning and really taking things in. So when they have homework to do, is not so much like I'm going and fight down with this homework now, but rather, to pull the information together and compile.
Correct.
Right, the information that they already know, to put it in a form that can then be, leveraged in terms of marking and helping them move forward with their grades and stuff like that.
Yeah, and to add to like the key takeaways in terms of your final thoughts, with regard to Fusion, I love this one statement that I came across. That's why I actually used it here. They talk about blended learning being the thoughtful fusion. So it's not just about saying, hey, we have technology and let's just drop it into the classroom. You have to think about it. You have to plan it. You have to determine how useful would this be, how would it be accepted, how we could mold it and grow it into something more. So it is a thoughtful fusion of, everything. And I think part of that thoughtfulness is tied back to, the amount of models and choices that we have. Don't get overwhelmed by the choices. Just kind of, I usually recommend just start with a rotation, integrate something into your curriculum, see how it's being adopted, see the get the feedback from students, and then start implementing more and more. And then you'll start growing, and you'll get into the more complex models over time, sometimes even before you know it. Getting this thing up around, there's so much free tools out there. You don't have to spend a ton of money. It would help. Yes, there's some effort that has to be done because you are focusing on the student. So you have a bit more work to do to prep classes, to create more meaningful content, to discover content that you want them to explore. But it's all about the students at the end of it, yeah? The reason why you get into teaching is not for yourself. It's to ensure that you empower the students, you make them successful, you help them understand about life. So I think shifting the core focus to the students and, continuing that journey using technology is a great opportunity for us. And it also allows you to amplify your reach. You're not teaching a class of 50 anymore. You could actually be teaching a class of 1,000 students with even less effort than you did, teaching 50 students. So these are some of the potential benefits of, exploring this part. And I think, getting the foundation understanding is necessary to help you make the right decisions, not just integrating tech, but thinking about it properly and, getting it up and running in the right way. Yeah. That's it. There's a, yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you again very much, Yuva.
All right. So with that being said, let me just say a heartfelt thank you to our presenters for taking the time to give us, to our avid listeners. Faith, thank you so very much for being very active and contributing. Thank you so very much to all of our listeners for taking time from your evening schedule to join with us. Right? We appreciate all the interactions, all the comments, and again, a further reminder, if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, please leave it on the YouTube channel. It will help us with our future webinars, to help us grow, improve. We're always striving to do better. Right?
Yeah, and don't be afraid, ask the questions. If you want to hear about something, we could always compile that, come up with it, and toss it up. If it's not in a full webinar, it may be something that we'll toss up as content on LinkedIn, etc. So, don't be afraid to ask the questions, and we'll try to provide as much as we can.
Just on that note, IDFect, the company, is on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook, right? Please join our community. So join us on our network on LinkedIn. Subscribe to us on Facebook. Reach out to us that way with any suggestion, comments, and stuff you have to help the company, to help with our planning moving forward with this. And with that being said, I would like to wish you all to please just continue to stay safe. I'm glad to see that rules are being relaxed and rollbacks are being happening, but it's still very out there. It's still very real. It's still impacting on us. So please continue to keep safe, and we will see you guys in the future. Thank you so very much. On behalf of the team, on behalf of Daniel, myself, Karen, Roger, Shiva, Kishan, thank you so very much for joining with us, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Take care.